Now we're going to take our first discussion for the day, and it's going to be on Nigerian sports industry. Because just like any other in developing countries, it has continued to face setbacks due to lack of proper funding, corruption, lack of proper policies, implementation, and of course, leadership. Now, although the situation has refused to change, concerted efforts made in the past to professionalize sports administration in the country have been unsuccessful. This is in addition to the myriad of challenges faced by over 35 sports federations which currently exist in Nigeria. Now, what is then the hope for a future where sports tournaments in Nigeria are comparable to those in developed countries? Now, in the studio, we have Ayo Adams, a sports enthusiast. He's joining us in the studio right here. And as well as David Ngubwa, the sports editor for Daily Trust, who joins us via telephone to continue to talk about the continuous drift in Nigeria's sports due to lack of policy management. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
All right, so let's start with Ayo Adams. Sports federations in Nigeria always engulfed in one crisis or the other. Usually when it comes to election, when you come to elect a new president and new board members, that is when these things happen. Why is that?
Well, I will start with, in sports, you should always put the athletes first,
Okay.
the sportsmen first. And what we've seen throughout the whole charade of all the sporting federations, from the topmost one, that's the NFF, to the Athletics Federation, to the NBFF, that's the Basketball Federation, it's always been about their personal agenda.
Okay.
If the very first thing that comes into the minds of these said administrators is the athletes, maybe something else will give. But then another significant factor is the people who are in, some of these people who have been put to run the leadership of these federations are not even sport enthusiasts. They're not even people who have had a history of the sports, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's athletics. They do not have it. So if you're not part of the core foundation of these platforms, how are you supposed to manage them properly? Starting with the NFF, it's with the body that governs the football. We can see how badly it is. We could not go to the World Cup. We've not been performing the sub-teams as the Super Eaglets, the Golden Eaglets, the under 21s, 17s, 16s, and so on, and the women's football. What's the result? And that shows how bad the leadership has been run so far.
Okay, now let's forward our next question to Mr. David. Mr. David, can you hear us? Good morning.
Yeah, you may have to speak up a little bit so I can get you clearly.
Okay, now we want to know, do you think there are proper policies in place for sports in Nigeria to be properly managed?
Yeah, I'm sure you're asking about whether we have a clearly defined sports policy that can guide in the development of sports. This is something that I'm not sure we are doing correctly, because for success to come our way, we must have to have a sports policy, because it is said he who fails to plan plans to fail. Because most times our results are attained by accidental discharges, because we don't have a policy direction, we don't have a blueprint, we don't have a roadmap to follow. So I think for us to move in the right direction, there has to be a sports policy that will guide those who are in charge in the right direction. We have made efforts in this direction in the past, beginning from 1963, when we have the National Sports Council. But the efforts we've made in the past lacked political will. We've been moving forth and back between the National Sports Commission and the Ministry of Sports, because whenever we have the National Sports Commission, we have sports technocrats who know a lot about sports and know what to do in order to develop our athletes. But when we come over to the Ministry of Sports, we have political appointees who most times know next to nothing about sports administration. So it has been back and forth. We either have the National Sports Commission, then we switch to the Ministry of Sports. So it has been like that. At the moment, we are all clamoring for the return of the National Sports Commission, which was disbanded the last time in 2016 by the former Minister of Sports, Solomon Dalong. The Senate committee has held a public hearing on the bill to bring back the National Sports Commission, but we are still waiting because it is not long ago in 2021 that the Senate gave approval for the return of the National Sports Commission, but as we speak, that has not been done. So sports in Nigeria is still drifting because of lack of policy, national policy.
All right, so as a follow-up to that, Mr. David, Daily Trust recently did a piece on sports policies in Nigeria, or lack thereof. What informed that particular piece, really?
Yeah, it's because of some of the things that we have narrated not long ago, because we believe wholeheartedly that for us to properly harness the abundant talents in Nigeria, we must have a sports policy. We must have a roadmap that we guide, because, like I said earlier, it's like we don't plan. We just wait for results to come. And that can't possibly happen, because if you don't plan, there's no way you will achieve results. Because Nigeria, we believe so much in prayers, while other countries are taking sports like serious business. In Nigeria, it is more of recreation, because we have not been able to exploit the business side of sports. And that is why we decided to make this incisive and in-depth report that we are working, whoever is concerned, particularly the federal government, to the fact that we need to give more serious attention to sports, to make sports business, because sports is like a gold mine that is left untapped.
Okay, now let me forward this question to Mr. Ayo in the studio. Now, there have been rumors of instability in the NFF, especially since Nigeria didn't qualify for, FIFA World Cup. Now, what do you think is actually responsible for this?
Well, it's a game of lack of preparation. It's a game of narcissism with the head, because when you take it back to how far Pinnick has come as the head of the NFF, they are the ones who are in charge of football in Nigeria. And if you look at him, he's someone who is, sorry to use the word delusional, which he speaks to the general public as if we do not understand what is going on in football. Regardless of whatever is happening, he's the one who flies out to see the players, he's the one who goes to media agents. That is not your work. If you have a structure that has its branches and everyone is fully functional, everybody has their set duties to do, to perform. Who manages the players' affairs, who manages traveling to go and meet the players, who manages speaking with the players and their coaches, getting results back, sending emails. That's not the job of the president of the NFF. He's supposed to oversee and make certain policies work. Not going to the World Cup came as a set of lack of preparation, and it's something that has been in the Nigerian team for a long time, putting people who've not been successful in anything. If you look at it in the game, we had Gennaro for 5 years, and under him for 5 years, we performed maybe a little bit good for like 2 years. Then we started to go downhill, and we had not even rumors anymore. There were rumors, but he had confirmed that by himself. He wasn't paid for over 18 months. How would you have a coach for your national team not paid for over 18 months? That is totally unfair. This is someone you expect to break in your superstars. And there's one thing with superstars. They believe, they indulge in themselves. They believe that they are there. The reason you need a coach is to bring them to that, fix them together as a working unit. And that's football. Nobody can do it alone. Now, when Nigeria started to have I think after the fourth, we had a game during the qualifiers and we drew 4-4 at home. Then Nigeria started to have this outcry, like, what is going on? And then the call for for Genetros sack started to come. Then eventually they said, okay, bring in Austin Eguavon, and then they took him to the Nations Cup. And at the Nation, we all knew that Eguavon was not the one running the show. He was just maybe a puppet that was there being told what to do, because he was a technical advisor or director at the NFF. Nothing was going on. Then they filled the technical team with a bunch of people there who should not even have any reason to be there. They took them to the African Cup of Nations. And when we went through our first couple of games, a lot of people were wowed. People were happy, I was. But I remember talking to a couple of my friends and I mentioned that we are all excited because we've not seen this in a long time. This is not spectacular. This is not special. This is not new. This is what countries give to their fans and their community and their supporters on a match day basis. When we saw that, so immediately we got out of the Nations Cup. You could see that anger, that irk hasn't left our body because everybody now reacted. Whether to the goalkeeper, they started to come up with, which was a little bit curbed afterwards. That still shows that we've not gotten anywhere. Then we had the major thing in our front, which is going to the World Cup. And I would say this out boldly, that I'm glad we didn't go to the World Cup, because it will have been another string of embarrassment. It will have been another way and another move for them to consume more money, for them to just keep misplacing their priorities. Because if we go to the World Cup and we perform woefully, we come back home with the same mentality, haven't spent money. FIFA would have given us millions. They would have charged the federal government for millions they would take which would not result to anything. We saw what happened at the Olympics. We saw all those things. So now you want the national team to triumph, but you have nothing behind them. The Super Eagles are clearly the only thing functioning in Nigerian football, and then the Super Falcons, who are through a gradual stage now, going through their own irks too and their own issues. But then the Super Eagles, it's been an array of disappointments back to back to back. The fans are tired, the supporters are tired, the sport enthusiasts are tired. But something is clear, they are not tired. And they're making it worse. The longer they stay, the worse it gets. Because it's for the future. If we don't get it right now, what about the people coming? Now we have young kids, young athletes, young boys and girls who want to play football. They do not see hope anymore. Now everybody's looking up to the shores of European football. Why we can't even develop ours right here in our locality?
All right. So let me bring back Mr. David on this one. Well, let's still talk policy. We're talking about a sports policy that is going to govern all of sports in Nigeria or guide all of sports in Nigeria. So if we have that kind of policy in place, what will the relationship between that policy be and the constitution of individual sporting federations? Because we actually have sporting federations that don't even have constitutions. Some have constitutions, but the constitutions are not being followed. So what is going to be the relationship between a national sports policy and the constitution of individual sporting federations?
Yeah. The relationship, we make it in such a way that everybody will know exactly what needs to be done, because the sports federations, because of lack of the policy that we're talking about, the federations do not know exactly what is expected of them, because most times these federations depend on the government for funding. Instead of going out to meet corporate organizations, they believe that whenever they have tournaments, whenever they have competitions, whenever they have activities or programs, it is the responsibility of the government. And the government at the same time complies. When these federations come to the government brings out the money. And as long as the government continues to fund these federations, they will never, ever go out there to approach corporate organizations for sponsorship. So we are believing that if there is a policy, a national sports policy on ground, it will clearly state the roles of the government, where the government comes in and where the government stops, and where the federations will take over. But as it is now, without a sports policy, everything is muddled up, because the government keeps giving to these federations who always come cap in hand looking for funding. But if the federations are made completely independent of government, they will know that if they don't source for funding on their own, the government will not give them money. And then only people who have genuine interest, only people who have capabilities that we aspire to lead these federations. But as it is now, everybody knows that government funds most of these federations. So even if I don't have anything to offer, for the sake of my own interest, I will aspire to be there because I know where to get money from. But now, if government stops funding because the policy says, no, don't do this, then everybody will sit up and only the right people will come into these sports federations.
All right, so Mr. David, as a follow-up to that, you talked about people that have the capabilities and, of course, the passion to actually run these sporting federations to be in charge. So are you of the opinion, or do you belong to that school of thought that believe ex-athletes are in the best position to run these sporting federations?
Exactly. I will agree with you. Not in all cases, but in most. The truth of the matter is this. I spoke about the National Sports Commission earlier. You will understand and you will agree with me that each time the National Sports Commission was led by a former athlete, let's talk about Hassan Yakmut, who was the last Director General of the National Sports Commission. This is a former Nigerian international. He played volleyball for Nigeria at the highest level, and all his life he has been in sports. So these are the kind of people that we believe, if the National Sports Commission is back and there is a policy, then when we have former athletes coming in to lead, these are people who have been out there in the sun. These are people who have competed actively. They know the needs of the athletes. They know what is expected of an athlete. They know the role they have to play to motivate these athletes. So I believe that if competent former athletes, we don't just have to say all ex-athletes, the competent ones, the educated ones, because I know for sure that it was not in the past that people were made to feel or to understand that athletes are people who are dullards, people who can't do well in school. But now we have athletes who are former athletes who are university graduates. So if such people are given opportunities to take over and run sports, we will make a headway. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but I'm quite disappointed with what is happening in Nigerian football. We have former football players, ex-internationals, who instead of fighting or instead of showing interest, indicating interest in taking over the Nigerian Football Federation, they are contented with being committee members. We call this person, come and be a member of this committee, be a member of this committee, and then you go back and sleep. Look at what is happening in Cameroon at the moment. Samuel Eto'o, a former Cameroonian international, has qualified Cameroon for the World Cup, where it was like not going to be possible. But it's because he has been there. He has the experience. He knows what it takes to be at the World Cup. So by this, I am calling on Nigerian ex-internationals to begin to show more interest in leadership. It is not just about attending birthdays and attending shows that are organized without, they must remember the primary constituency.
Okay, now a lot of questions I actually wanted to ask was answered by Mr. David, but let me forward this question to you. Now, do you also agree that, the sporting sector can actually witness accelerated growth if the National Sports Commission is restored and entrusted in the hands of professionals?
Yes, I think so. The first thing policies will do is that it would create a roadmap. And when that roadmap is created, everybody's bound to follow that roadmap. But it's like Mr. David mentioned earlier, you need to cut the government funding. In their head somewhere is, whether we like it or not, federal government will give us the money. Now, when you cut that funding, when you cut that funding and you rip that line off, you now have an open space for people who understand the sport. Someone who genuinely understands the sport will get their mantles up and say, maybe even younger people will get their mantles up and say, okay, I think it's time to change the sport. So now handing it to the hands of professionals, like he also rightly said, not every one of them are prepped to be that. And like back in the day, athletes have not always been seen as people who are well educated, but now, moving forward, when athletes, while they are playing football right now, some of them go to colleges, some of them, after they retire as footballers, they don't just go to retire, they go and take courses, they go to training camps, whether it's UEFA, whether it's FIFA, whether it's coaching, just to keep their mind to move into the administrative part of football. Now we've seen a lot of ex-players becoming coaches, like Patrick Vieira, Arteta, Lampard, Xavi, and so on. And that's simply because while they were done, before they finished playing football, before it was just retire and then do something. But now, before they leave football, everybody, some of them are already aiming at coaching schools, workshops, trainings. This gives them the room, the opportunity, creates that space for them to do something afterwards. Hence Samuel Eto'o. Hence Didier Drogba, who's also going to contest in the next coming election for Cote d'Ivoire to be their federation president. These are people who understand the sport. They get it. Samuel Eto'o, while the AFCON was being hosted in Cameroon, while they kept delaying it, he was so agitated and angry that, why do you keep delaying? Let us make you work however we see fit. Along the way, we will fix whatever deficit that is in between the lines. And you can see him gradually progressing with the team. You can see that he has an agenda. He wants, I read a statement by him saying that it's not about the Kylian Mbappes of the France and everything. He wants people, he wants kids from Cameroon, from the core of Yaoundé, to rise up as superstars from the world. I mean, people like Eto'o, people like Drogba, JJ Okocha, Kano are the ones who gave Africa the ability to talk about football because they stood out. They were significant figures. They were heroes to young athletes, young kids like us while we were growing up. We were people that were watching. We were always looking up to them. And now some of them have not taken up that mantle of leadership and felt like this is what we need to do. But with us here, they are quite lean back. They are okay with betting platforms. They are okay with attending inaugurations. They are okay with attending FIFA or UEFA competitions, just showing the paparazzis of all these things. How are you supposed to remain the world legend in football if you're not going to help enhance the growth of this sport? The kids, whether they like it or not, whether sportsmen like it or not, we look up to them. The whole country looks up to them. Football unites us. Sports generally unites us. We see how it brings us together in that time of disdain, of peril. We always come together for sports. But then the significant figures that we've seen all over the years, for me, they're just washing away. It's more like everything I have, all the great memories I have of them as being spectacular footballers is clearly washing away because of their attitude towards this. They might be laid back simply because of the political environment of Nigeria. We know how it is. It's toxic. But nothing has ever come easy. Even FIFA had to take off Sepp Blatter after years and years, which there were a lot of corruptions. Even UEFA had to take off Platini to bring in Schäferin. Now we have FIFA Infantino. That shows that there was even the biggest federations, even the biggest governing bodies can uproot their leader, put someone else in charge to make things better for the course of the sport.
So basically, the problem of sports in Nigeria is leadership.
It's leadership.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. David, let me come back to you quickly. You made mention of something earlier about sports being a gold mine that we are actually yet to harness, and which means we are not actually looking at sports as a business. Rather, we're looking at it as a vocation. So apart from what you made mention of maybe cutting government funding to force these associations to go to corporate organizations to get money, how else can we be able to tap into this gold mine that is sports in Nigeria?
Okay, that is apart from the government and the corporate organizations?
Yes.
Yeah, it is about, recently the Honorable Minister of Sports, the President Minister of Sports, Sunday Dare, he came up with what he calls a sports industry policy, which he said the core objective is to take sports away from recreation to a very serious business that will motivate, individuals, that will motivate maybe the corporate world to begin to see the need to invest in sports. Because sports, if you invest in sports, it comes with a lot of benefits. Even apart from the issue of money that sports brings in, like a third world country like Nigeria, where we have a lot of challenges. We all know that sports is an opium, particularly football, opium of the masses. It helps in unifying us. It creates job opportunities as well. Maybe take some of the less privileged youths off the streets. So apart from all this, we just have to provide the facilities. Facilities are needed, and then encouragement for people to come, organizations to come in, especially when administrators begin to be more transparent in the management of available funds, because most of these corporate organizations sometimes are reluctant to put in their money because we keep hearing about corruption here, corruption there, when people are not coming clean on how they are managing the available resources. So I believe that when sports becomes real business and government hands off, the government can only provide the enabling environment in terms of maybe providing facilities and the roadmap, as we keep saying, then the rest will take shape, because those who have genuine interest will come in and run this as business, and then we'll get the full benefits.
All right, so Adams, let me come back to you in 60 seconds now. Just wrap this up in a nice little bow for everybody. Now, if we have a sports policy which takes care of how these sporting associations are run, right? In your own opinion, is it the silver bullet that is actually required to calm all these internal wranglings that we actually have when it comes to these sporting associations, most especially when it comes to time of elections?
Well, first thing is the policy is it's more like the reawakening. Okay. When the policy is there, we've built a house. Now, when the house is built, you can't sleep in an empty house. So you have to fill those houses up with whatever facilities you need. If you need a bed, if you need a fridge, if you need a cooking gas, and so on. Now, what are those things? They are infrastructures. Okay. Now, you have to keep those infrastructures in place. Look around you. Look for the major states in the country that you know has sporting athletes. Wherever, look for somewhere. Build these facilities there. Let us start grooming young people, young kids. They want to play sports. We've seen a low turnout for sports. I know about a lot of grassroots platforms that are doing a lot of things with less funding. Now imagine with the funding that the federal government has, when those infrastructures are in place, you have kids going there on a daily basis. Now you're already creating a pool for investors to come, because no investor is going to come into a business that they know has been poorly run, leadership-wise, financially-wise. We've had complications with federations, with governing bodies about money. So no businessman in his honest mind will come and invest in it. I mean, our MPFL is our easiest example. So now when those infrastructures are being put in place, now you have kids going there day in, day out. You have competitions going there. You're grooming them. They're going. You're having internal local competitions. You're seeing people winning with merit. Okay. With merit. Now you have these young kids, these young athletes, footballers, young boys and girls grooming themselves, winning competitions, getting there. You're prepping them for these stages. You now have under 13s, under 17s, under 21s, under 23s. You've groomed them properly. Now, investors are not going to just come directly. Some investors might even come for the young kids, because there are so many organizations out there who want to develop young women in football, young boys in football, young boys in basketball, and every other sport. If they see those structures properly in place, that is only when they'll be convinced to come in, invest. When they invest, then we can now be able to say, oh, we are now rising up to the plate with our country.
All right, so we have the policy,
yes,
have the infrastructure,
yes,
develop the grassroots, and then investors will come in.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. Ayo Adams, sports enthusiast. This was very fantastic having you on the show this morning. And of course, David Ngobwa, our Daily Trust sports editor. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ismail.